Oh, do you know what? I love that. For those of you watching online at home, you'll have just seen our brand new intro. And if you are just joining us on audio only, do drop by YouTube because we've got a great new intro video. Anyway, hello and welcome to episode 395 of the Stacey West podcast. I am your host, Gary, and this is the 8th season the Stacey West podcast will have been covering Lincoln City. 8 seasons. Joining me today is a man who is so youthful he doesn't look like he was born 8 seasons ago. It's Chris Lamming. How are you?
Oh, that's a very nice thing to say. It's factually incorrect, but I'll take it all the day. Thank you very much. I'm very well, mate. Very well indeed. I think it's impossible not to be well, isn't it? After an opening day victory. So yeah, all good, mate. All good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. So I've got somebody in the comments already saying hairdo. So again, for those of you watching online and not listening, I do now have a Mohican, which I know for those of you listening will be like, oh, wow, okay, right, you've got a Mohican then. So yeah, I've got one of those for a festival that we are going to next weekend. Yeah, I do you know what? I'm a little bit hacked off. For a couple of reasons. One, because I haven't changed my internet before we've logged on, despite saying that I had to do so, and therefore we're going to be dicing with a dodgy internet connection all afternoon. Secondly, because my dog cost me £60. Now,
yeah, I know what's coming, but you have to share this.
So my dog is a little bit of a bugger. So he's 9 years old. He's a Shih Tzu, little shit by nature, Shih Tzu by name. Friday morning, he jumped off the bed, landed because he sleeps on the bed from about 4 o'clock in the morning or wherever he can get on, landed awkwardly on his paw. He starts holding his paw up all limp. Oh no, here we go. So carry him downstairs, carry him to his food. An hour later, he's still not walking, so I carry him out. He has to have a wee and a poo, so I've carried him outside. He's done that, carried him back in. All day, he's just laid on his bed. I went out into Louth when I came back, didn't even get off his bed and run and meet me like he normally does, carried him out for a poo. So we're going to have to take him to the vet. Going to have to do it. So ring up, we get an emergency vet appointment at 10 to 7 at night. By the way, which meant instead of cooking dinner, I did get a Chinese. So every silver lining to a cloud and all that. So we drove him to the vets. He's in the back of the car. We had to carry him. He's still sat like in the back of the car with his little paw. We get to the vet. Fee gets out the car. There's another dog in the car park. He jumps out the car like nothing is wrong, running around on his paw. Just like nothing is wrong, like no pain, not wincing, not limping, nothing at all. We thought, well, we better take him in to get checked out. £60 later. £60 for what? So that he can get high for the next 4 nights on painkillers he doesn't need. Drug addict.
Mugged you off. He mugged you right off.
Yes, he did. Right, we've got a lot to get through, so let's cut the small talk. This is the 8th season of the Stacey West podcast, and over the previous seasons, I think we've only lost one opening game, which was against Bolton 3-0. In fact, I think we've only lost one opening game of the season since our relegation season in 2010 and 11. We lost away at Rotherham that day. We lost at Bolton. I think they're the only two the games that we've lost opening games of the season in however long that is, like 15 years. And we did not lose yesterday, but the story of the game does not start at 5 o'clock or even at 3 o'clock, but it starts a couple of hours beforehand. Now, we will be covering the news of Jovon Makama and his potential move in the second half of the show, so please do bear with us. But I was in the Millers. I think you were down at the ground, and the news came through. Jovon not in the side temporarily. I think that made this game so much more important because losing Ethan, we talked about narrative. I don't really agree with a narrative in pre-season, but on the opening day of the season, that's where your story starts. And when your story starts with, well, we've got 4 best players, arguably 4 of our 5 best players from last season gone, one of them on the eve of the season, you don't think about fees, you don't think about the future, you don't think about all that sort of stuff. You think about, ooh, are we depleted? And to be honest, in the Millers, in the beer garden, I felt a little bit flat.
Yeah, same. It was, I didn't know how to feel. And I think on the back of a good result, it helps feel differently and a good night's sleep and a bit of, just letting things settle a little bit. But in the moment, was a bit surprised because I was going into the game feeling quite quietly confident. I know that there was a little bit of pessimism around the system across the wider fan base, but if you can't be optimistic on the first game of the season before a ball's kicked, when can you? And I was feeling quite optimistic going into the game, expecting Jovon Makama to have a big role to play in that match, but also over the whole season as well. And media instincts and thought when we heard that Jovon wasn't in the match day squad, and the reasons for it were, well, that makes this afternoon quite considerably more challenging. Maybe that little bit of positivity I had going into the game had been wiped away briefly. And then I kind of had a little bit of a quiet word with myself and thought, it's one player. There's 11 of them on the pitch at any one time. We've got a decent squad still, albeit we need to add to it. It just turns into a very big game for Rob Street now, who is likely to play in the same role. But yeah, I agree with you. The initial immediate feeling was like, long term, that's going to be great for the club. But this afternoon, it makes things a bit more difficult.
Yeah, I think it did. It made things, because I was a little pessimistic. I didn't have the new season vibes. Obviously, there's a fair bit going on here, which has kind of detracted from my enjoyment of the opening game anyway. But I just didn't feel it. I got up, I didn't feel it, and then you kind of in town, and I'm trying to just get a little bit G'd up for it, which, because it's the same old players from last season, give or take two. Normally you have that excitement of how the new signing's going to bed in. Well, we can talk about that, but we've only got two of them, and how are your best players from last season going to do? Well, four of them have gone, and let's face it, 4 of the 5 shouts for Player of the Year last season have gone. There's only Tendai still there. Pawdy, Sean, Ethan Arant. They were the kind of the top 5, I think. So yeah, it was hard to take. This team selection came out. Rob Street was the obvious pick, I think, for replacing Jovon, despite being a centre forward. There was lots of mumblings at the end of last season that he's played up top for Doncaster. He's going to come in here and play out wide, didn't he? Laugh, joke. Yes, he did, for reasons. For me, I think the biggest surprise, and I know it wasn't a surprise for you, it's probably something we disagree on a little bit, is the Bayliss and Hamilton. I'm a big Ethan Hamilton fan, and I think having him somewhere in the side is a benefit. He didn't start. Jack Moylan started in the 10, but with Ben House injured, there was a lot of other options because Rico couldn't start there because we didn't have people out wide. It was really, there wasn't many decisions for Michael Skubala to make in terms of team selection. That's how kind of skinned back to the bone we are at the minute.
Yeah, I think there was only really 2 decisions that Michael had to make, and that was who was going to partner Conor McGrandles, because I think Conor McGrandles is probably nailed on starter at this point of the season with the squad we've currently got in the role he's playing. It's then who plays next to him. Now, Tom Bayliss and Ethan Hamilton are very different players. And I think one thing that Bayliss has that Hamilton hasn't is the set piece delivery and how not reliant we are, but how dominant we have been on set pieces. I think that's a big factor to that.
You never mentioned that in the pub while we were chatting last night, did you? When we were arguing,
I may have just thought of it.
You pulled it out of the bag there for me. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, sorry, mate. But also, I think the only other decision was who would partner Sonny Bradley at centre back, and it was Adam Jackson off the back of a new deal, of course, and Tom Hamer was left on the bench. Now, I think there might be a couple of reasons for this. Number one, Reading's style meant that we were rarely going to get caught in behind because of how their number 9 operates. But also, like, Tom Hamer is a centre back, but is very comfortable at filling in at right back and left back if required as well, or as it turned out yesterday, for 5 minutes at right wing, but primarily any of those places across the back line. And because we are pretty threadbare in terms of squad depth at the moment, maybe it felt that, well, if you keep Hamer on the bench, if Riley Towler gets injured, either of the centre backs get injured or Tendai does, Hamer can slot straight in there without the rest of the backline having to reshuffle. So maybe it was a bit of a logistics sort of thing as well. But both Jacko and Sonny Bradley certainly proved their point and proved their worth in terms of the selection.
Now, 5 minutes in, I've got a little bit worried. I don't want to labour on this too much, but I thought we had a shaky first 5 minutes. Let's be honest. Reading have got a really decent core there with Wing, Elliott and Savage in the middle. But to be fair, up top, they don't have an awful lot. Ia Bishman was all right. He's a physical presence. Aren't you impressed that I said that first time without having to stumble over it at all? Ia Bishman. Let me just say it one more time. But I thought first 5 minutes, I thought they looked all right. We looked a bit shaky. I thought it took Bradley and Towler just a little bit of perhaps not a lack of communication. For a second, I thought this is going to be a long afternoon. But after those first 5, I thought that we didn't take control of the game. they had more possession. They were decent on the ball, but after those first 5 minutes, I didn't feel massively threatened.
Agreed. Yeah, totally agreed. I wouldn't say I felt worried in the first 5 minutes, but we did look a bit nervy. Reading looked neat and tidy, and I expected them to do so, but they didn't have a huge amount in regard to clear-cut chances at any point in the game, let alone just in that first 5 minutes. But territorially, they had a lot of the ball in our half. It wasn't just like they were knocking it around their back four, which they were for the majority of the game, by the way. You'll look at the possession stats, and you'll see that Reading had 67% of the ball over the 90 minutes, but only 41% of that possession was actually in our half. Of our possession, over 60% of it was in Reading's half. So you can see kind of where the game was actually played in that regard. But in the first 5 minutes, they had the territory. But yeah, I agree with you. As soon as we kind of got a bit of a foothold into the game, and it was through grit, determination, organisation, and work rate, really, that did it for us. Hard running. And we I feel like we just physically won the battle against Reading, and we kind of ground them down a little bit, and we physically dominated the rest of the first half, really. And we had some neat and tidy moments ourselves, but it was primarily off that kind of off the ball stuff, really good organisation. And that just gave us a bit of a foothold. Once we kind of worked out Reading's system and style, I felt we were tactically superior for the majority of the first half.
Yeah, so they were playing quite high, which is a benefit to us. We must remember that Reading came and played quite high against us at Christmas, and we beat them 2-0, and we came away from that game feeling quite positive. So there wasn't actually an awful lot of difference between the two games, except they were perhaps a little bit better defensively. I seem to think that they were average defensively that day. Ironically, I think it was the game that Jovon first really came to light as a threat on the wing. So it looked very, very similar to that. And our first goal, which we'll jump straight to, came from probably what would be best described as route one. If it hadn't been an own goal, George Wickens, I think, would have got the second assist, which would have been quite something. It looked like it was out the John Beck playbook, but let's not play this down with this being a long ball game, because Rob Street showed not just pace, but an absolutely sumptuous touch to bring that ball down. And just have it just at the sort of right distance in front of him to be able to run onto and beat the defender. It's a cross. I think in the pre-match interview, he said, get the shot away. He's looking for Rico, and had the defender not turned it in, I firmly believe the ball would have ended up at Rico's feet. It would have been 1-0 anyway, but it was a nice moment for Rob, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It turned into a big afternoon for Rob Street, because he's playing in the role that Jovon most likely would have been, and I thought he was superb in the first half. I thought he was really, really good. And playing off the right, I don't want to call it the Jovon Makama role. We have to stop saying that. But it is the role that Jovon made his own in the last part of last season. And as much as he's playing off the right, he's not a central striker, but he is a central threat. Starting out wide and cutting in and driving, being really direct towards the goal. Bit different on the other side. But you mentioned it's not a long ball game, but it was a long pass, and there was quite a few of those yesterday. But there were quite a few of those yesterday because Reading played into our hands. It was the obvious thing to do against Reading. On our goal, I thought Conor McGrandles played a very important role. I think it was McGrandles played a very important role. Noel Hunt wasn't very happy about this in his interview, but honestly, I think it's quite soft from Reading. But yeah, George Wickens, lovely composure, by the way, off a half-arsed press from the Reading player. But it's just not a lump up the pitch. He's clearly picked that ball out. McGrandles comes up and then occupies centre-back, allowing Rob Street to have the space to run into. Great ball forward by Wickens. Really good first touch by Rob Street to allow him to keep his momentum. And then agree with you totally. Obviously, a bit of good fortune with it being an own goal, but it was a good cross that I agree with you totally would have reached Rico Hackett and would have been a tap-in, bar some sort of goalkeeping heroics. You'd imagine Rico would have slotted that away. So yeah, a move that justified the outcome, the goal, albeit an own goal at the end of it. But yeah, I agree with you. Really big moment for Rob. He had a good first half as well. Really combative and really powerful runner. So I was pleased at that moment, as I'm sure 9,000 plus, 8,000-ish people were as well in Sinsel.
Yeah, you would imagine so. Now, I was quite critical of referee Martin Woods during the course of the afternoon. Thought that he felt like he was giving a little bit more to them than he was us. Then you come back and watch the replays, and probably he's been as bad for both teams, but he didn't get anything major wrong for us. I did watch in the middle of the goal, by the way. One of their boys goes down as the ball comes through, and I didn't know if there was a collision or the replay kind of progresses too fast. And at the minute, I haven't got Y-Scout to watch back in super slow motion. But I did just wonder if there was when you say a clever block, it's only a clever block if you're the team making the block, or if their boy just slipped over. I don't know.
That's what I was on about with McGrandles. I think McGrandles had pushed
Okay.
forward to occupy the centre back, so then Street was free. So yeah,
Occupy. I see.
Yes, occupy
Triple
being
occupy.
the technical term, but yeah, grapple, I suppose. My whole thing thought it was a foul, but I think if you're giving fouls for those off-ball things, there's going to be 150 fouls every single game. So,
if you're giving fouls for grappling, Rob Street would have had 4 or 5 in his favour because he was hauled down on 4 or 5 occasions, wasn't he? But there were 2 big incidents that I think, had they gone against us, we would have been not screaming blue murder, because they were both marginal, and we try and be balanced on the Stacey West podcast, no matter what Twitter tell you. The first one, I think it was the first one. I'm not sure chronologically which was first, but there's a push on one of their boys in the area. Adam Jackson, it's 2 hands in the back. In fact, that was the first one, because that led to the corner that led to the second one. It was 2 in a minute. It's a penalty. They should have had a penalty. It's that simple.
Yes. Yeah. In the ground, I think possibly the angle that we were sat at didn't even see it. To be honest, saw it as coming together. Didn't hear massive shouts from the Reading end either. I know there's a few, but it wasn't kind of uproar. But looking at the replay, maybe there should have been. But I think Mr. Omani, who played in the number 9 role for Reading, he almost tried too hard to play for the foul. So he jumped into Jacko, backed into him, and then fell to the floor like he'd been shot, screaming bloody murder. And he almost bounced off Jacko, so it made it look like he was exaggerating it. Now, it was a foul. It should have been a penalty, but it almost was a bit like the boy who cried wolf. He made it so obvious that it was a foul, it made you think he was diving. I think that's kind of what the feeling I got from it. But I agree with you, mate. It absolutely was a foul. Just a little bit on Omani up top, because I think that was one big thing on Reading yesterday. They did look light up top. Obviously, they lost Harvey Nibbs to Charlton recently, but Omani was statistically the worst player on the pitch, which I thought was quite fun after his antics there. Played 71 minutes, only made 3 accurate passes in the whole game out of 7 attempted. Had 16 touches, only 1 of them was in the box. Was dispossessed twice. Won 1 out of 3 ground duels and 3 out of 11 aerial duels. Statistically, the worst player on the pitch. So, yeah, you can see their lights up there. And he did everything he could to win a penalty. In all honesty, if he had tried less hard to win the pen and just played, he probably would have won the penalty because it was a clear foul by Jacko.
In fairness, his first start for them, isn't it? Because he signed this summer, and only his 7th professional start. He's only 20 years old. So, they've got quite a bit of inexperience, I think, in forward lines. When they get a little bit of experience, bear in mind they lost Sam Smith last year as well. But I think when they get that experience up top, I can see in Reading a top 10 side. In honesty, certainly I thought they were well organised. And Lewis Wing's always a threat from range and from the corner that wasn't a penalty. Wickens makes the save from a long range drive, and their best 2 chances were long range drives. I think Wickens touches it onto the post. Their boy stabs it home. Kamara judged to be offside, and you and I disagree. I've watched it back. There's no conclusive angle. I think the boy's offside, and you think perhaps it's another harsh decision for Reading.
I do think it's a harsh decision, yeah. So there was arguably 2 Reading players offside at the point that Wing takes his shot. One of which I'm not sure is the chap who's called Kamara or not. He's right on the corner of the shot on the right hand side, and if you kind of draw an imaginary line across, which I think they do in VAR, it's just imaginary lines, isn't it? I would probably say he was probably onside. Judging that, so the only angle we don't have any other angles. So in that whole phase of play with the penalty shout and then that being ruled out, did Reading deserve a goal off the back of something that happened in that kind of couple of minute spell? Probably. Yeah, probably so. I wouldn't say their overall play deserved it because they weren't that threatening for the majority of the game. But those couple of moments, I think if you're a Reading fan, you do feel hard done by. And I wouldn't say we've got away with one because it was inconclusive. It could well have been offside. But yeah, I certainly felt quite pleased at that moment in time that with those 2 big shouts going our way, maybe in hindsight I shouldn't have been quite so harsh to criticise every decision the referee didn't give us, but maybe there's a reason that he didn't give us a lot in the second half.
Yeah, I do think. I think first half expected goals. Neither of us were really really that great. I think it was 0.14 for us and 0.06 for them. So, whilst 1-0 was something we'd take, 0-0 would probably have been fair in the first half, or 1-1. I thought we played well. I thought we had some decent efforts. There was a back stick header, I think, from Sonny Bradley from a corner that he's nodded it down into the dangerous areas that we weren't quite picking up on. And there was a second half one actually from James Collins, whereas a cross, and he's tried to nod it down in the area to somebody a little bit more understanding. And I think we'll get there. And, bear in mind, I was talking about some of the key players that I think it was it Street, Moylan and Collins all linking up nicely. And I was trying to add up how many times they wouldn't have ever played together as a three, but how many times even the pairs have played together. And you think Moylan and Street a couple of times last season, Moylan and Collins a couple of times, but that was quite a new dynamic from three players that we feel quite familiar with. So yeah, I think we were obviously happy to go in 1-0 at half time. I thought that Reading had a decent spell going into the end of the first half, but in fairness, like I say, we didn't look like scoring. You can see that they're a part squad. We're certainly a part squad, but it didn't feel like that, did it? It still felt like it was a half decent game of football.
It did, yeah. At half time, I was really satisfied. Obviously, result helped, or scoreline helped, but as is, of course, standard by me, just really liked our out of possession play because we stopped them starting, which is a phrase that you hear a little bit from the club at times, but it was brilliant, particularly when Joel Pereira had the ball, which was Reading's goalkeeper, which was quite regularly goal kicks, ball in his hands, etc., deep possession. And we were out of possession at times in that first half, 4-4-2, but a 4-4-2 diamond with Tom Bayliss at the tip of it. So I mentioned this when we reviewed the West Brom game from last week, albeit only a friendly. And I mentioned how interesting it was that it was one of our sixes that was pushing up onto the deepest midfielder of the opposition, not our number 10 doing that, which gave us two in the front line press. And it was great. It was great. Lewis Wing only really had the ball in his own third, didn't really dictate the play higher up the pitch other than his long-range efforts outside the box off set pieces. I just thought our setup out of possession was really good. And it's as much as Reading had a lot of the ball, the vast majority of it was in their thirds, particularly in the first half. And yeah, I just loved that from us. And then when we had the trigger to go and press, we were just so aggressive, so aggressive. And Michael used the statement and the phrase empty the tank in his post-match press conference. I think that was a really good kind of metaphor because I don't think any player left anything, had anything kind of left over. It was all left on the pitch. And as fans, let's be honest, that's what we really want to see, particularly with the news that we had about Jovon leaving. And the squad feels a little bit bare at the moment, a little bit. Not got a lot of depth, lacking probably a little bit of technical quality. When you work your backsides off and you work harder and you're bigger and you're stronger and you're more aggressive than the opposition, as a fan, I just absolutely love to see it, and was really satisfied at halftime.
So second half, we came out. I thought we started relatively well. I thought we didn't drop off in terms of like trying to sit on the lead in the first half, but I think after the goal there was a slight less intensity because we didn't need to be as intense. We'd got the 1-goal lead. I thought when we came out for the second half, it felt like we almost ramped it up a tiny bit. Probably should have been 2-0 up from Jack Moylan. And again, we talked about Rob Street, and around me where we kind of said, oh, Street had a good first half but disappeared a bit in the second. Well, actually, it's his pinpoint cross, which picks out Jack Moylan, 6 yards out on the edge of the 6-yard box. Probably should do better. I mean, Pereira is one of the better keepers in the division, by the way. But he makes a really good stop. And looking at our second half XG, I think we were at something like 1.33 in the second half. That's got to be a good portion of that, hasn't it? Because it was a chance that I think had it been James Collins, we would have been 2-0. And that's no slur on Jack Moylan, but it was a great opportunity.
It was a great opportunity, great save, and I'm definitely going to be in the keepers' union here and saying that it's a fantastic save. I know Jack's header is straight down the middle of the goal, but Pereira wasn't in the middle of the goal when the cross came in. He was at his near post. He's come across. He's thrown a hand up at it, and he's got a good hand on it. A lot of goalkeepers would not save that. Jack's done well to ghost in on the blind side. James Collins occupies two defenders with a near post run. Rob Street does well to spot that and not try and find Collins and to knock it further into the box. And like you say, pinpoint cross on for Jack. I think 9 times out of 10 that goes in. I think it's a good save, but take the positives out of that. Jack's made a great run. It was a successful cross from Street. It would have made everyone's afternoon a bit easier from that point if it went 2-0, but I'm choosing to take the positives out of that moment in hindsight rather than the negatives. But it certainly was a big moment, yeah.
Now, I think Wing hit the post while it was 1-0, didn't he? So the chance, I think, up the other end was, I'm not sure if it was another save from Wickens. I can't clearly remember it. I don't clearly remember the opposition's efforts. But again, it was another great Lewis Wing effort. Comes off the post. They weren't ever out of the game, but I never felt that they were going to score. They weren't creating anything clear-cut in the area. FootMob have a measurement of clear-cut chances. There was no clear-cut chances for Reading at all. It's almost like the toothless tiger, isn't it? The all bark and no bite, I think, for Reading at the moment, and something that they will remedy. But at 1-0, even when they hit the post, I never really felt in danger of us going to 1-1.
Yeah, and it's easy to say that after the fact, isn't it? But I think I felt similar. I have to say, I was the opposite of you pre-match in that I had the massive new season buzz. I was so excited. I got the relax reminder on my watch about 5 or 6 separate times so as the game went on because my heart rate was higher than normal, and that settles as the season progresses. So it felt like on edge for the game. Partly that was new season nerves. I felt that Reading always were in the game. I thought they technically were quite good. Second half, they were able to play out because they changed their build-up, so we weren't able to press quite as aggressively. But you mentioned as well, we didn't have to press as aggressively as well. But I never felt they were out of it. But I felt if they were going to score, it'd be a long-range shot from Lewis Wing, or it'd be that sort of kind of a goal out of nowhere. I felt quite comfortable defending our box, and so for all their possession, they didn't really have a lot to show for it in terms of clear-cut chances. So I felt quite calm in general build-up. It was only on the rare occasion where there was a set piece or where there was a sustained build-up in our half, which happened a couple of times, where I felt a little nervy. But I've had no reason to, because our defensive kind of organisation was absolutely superb yesterday.
So we'll talk about our goal now. The new season, as I've already alluded to on this podcast so far, is always about those new players. How are those new players going to do? How are those new faces going to fit in? What excitement can the new boys add to a stale and slightly mouldy existing squad? That is the perception across 92 football clubs, 91 football clubs, because this was a goal that was made in 2020 in reality, and was finished off in 2022, I think he signed. So it's Adam Jackson with some solid defensive work, 160 plus appearances, 2 more years to go. We'll reach the 200, dispossessing, holding on to the ball well. Conor McGrandles, 3 spells at Lincoln City with a ball that, Ethan Arahan dreams about making those sorts of passes and then does it every week. But do you know what I mean? It was pinpoint Rico using his pace, not the Rico that we saw out on the left wing back, kind of trying to have to track back and losing all his attacking potency. It was the Rico Hackett that we thought we'd signed. The Rico Hackett, I remember, was he at Bromley? Was it Charlton and then Bromley? And then he stepped up to Portsmouth, I think. And I remember watching him at Bromley thinking he's a player and a half. Strides through, has so much time to think about it, that it's like, if I play FIFA and I've got time to think about it, I screw it up. If you do it instinctively, you score. So it gets harder the closer he gets to goal because he's got more time to think about it and finishes. You're talking about a goal made by 3 of the most experienced in fact, dare I say, the 3 longest serving Lincoln players on the pitch?
Could well have been.
I think it's probably the 3 longest serving players on the pitch. Who needs new signings? 2-0 kills the game off, but it was a lovely goal, wasn't it? See, a nice team effort.
Yeah, it does kill the game off. I think Adam Jackson deserves a lot of credit in that moment in time to win it back. There was a bit of kind of toing and froing for the 30 seconds or so leading up to that moment as well, that we were quite combative again. Again, that's a recurring theme of the game, isn't it? Conor McGrandle's superb ball through. Now, don't get me wrong, he had an acre of space to pass the ball into, but it was a lovely kind of weighted ball through, well-timed run by Hackett, and a great finish. In the stands, it felt like he took so long to take the shot. Watching it back on the replays, it wasn't actually as long as it felt. It was just really composed. It's a really clever finish, opening his body as if he's going to shape it into the bottom left and shapes it the other side. Really good finish. 2-0, game over. At that point, it did feel like game over as well, because we felt quite comfortable with Reading at that point. in terms of their build-up play. We were quite good defending our box and stopping it. And from that point, they kind of just went. They seemed quite desperate in their play, Reading. They went quite direct, which completely plays into our hands. And the game kind of petered out from that point. But I thought it was a really professional performance from us at that point to actually see the game out really comfortably.
Now, I've just done some rudimentary mathematics in my head, which, words are my thing, not numbers. I think between Rico, Conor McGrandles and Adam Jackson have got 324 Lincoln City appearances across their spells at the club. So that's 5 different spells. Adam and Rico obviously in separate spells, but Rico's in his 3rd season now. Adam Jackson's in what is 5th, 6th season now, 2020 to 21. So probably 21, 22, 22, 23. Yeah, so yeah. And Conor in his 3rd spell. I mean, it's absolutely crazy when you think about it. And it's all the thing is, it's also, we're going to come on to talk about this. It's also quite comforting in that, do you know what? Actually, the old guard, and not even the best of the old guard in many people's eyes, but the old guard, perhaps 3 very undervalued players from last season. Certainly for me, undervalued. I thought Jacko dropped off after Christmas and only really came back to the forefront at March. Rico didn't get going until Christmas and then was inconsistent, at times unplayable. And certainly in the 10 role, he did really well. And, Conor was lambasted by so many supporters last season as, we've got to get rid, whereas actually he was man of the match yesterday. It almost felt like as much a part of the narrative as Rob Street's goal. Like Rob Street replaces Jovon, he scores. But these 3 are almost, dare I say, the forgotten men of the squad. You kind of get caught up. It's like when you go to your wardrobe and you constantly ignore 3 polo shirts all the time. And then all of a sudden you put them on and you're like, you know what? I actually look quite good in these. Maybe I don't need any new clothes. It's a little bit like that, I think.
Yeah, I guess a great analogy. I think I can only agree with you, really. We're always looking, particularly like when the transfer window is open, it almost feels like a separate sport. Like what's happening on the pitch almost takes a back seat to the separate sport that's happening in the newspapers and with the signings coming and going. And it's just really comforting just to know that we've already got a decent squad here with players that are really competent and well drilled. Yesterday, I think it was the whole being greater than the sum of the parts kind of defined the performance, really. And I love Michael Skubala's post-match interview, really kind of emphasising that team ethic. But of course, that the team is made up of components that are individuals, but those individuals seem to kind of, they know each other, don't they? It's that kind of comfort that you get and that familiarity that you get. So yeah, good, really good. We've got a good squad already, a competent squad that's going to keep us safe this year. The question is now, of course, can we build upon that with a little bit of extra quality? But we'll get onto that in the second half, I'm sure.
Should have been 3-0 as well, shouldn't it?
Yeah, I like that we still took the free kick really quickly, even though it was in the dying embers of the game. I love that desire to go and kind of put that final nail in the coffin. I thought Bayliss did really well. I think he had a good game, Tom Bayliss. Yeah, it was a tight angle. In fairness, obviously not hitting the target makes it look like a missed opportunity. But I thought it was a good opportunity to miss, if that makes sense. Possibly could have squared it in hindsight, but hey, it didn't matter in the end. But I liked to see the desire to go and score a third. It must have only been 5 minutes or so to go at that point, so it was nice to see.
Yeah, I quite like Tom. I thought he had a decent game. He's the sort of player that unless he conjures something magical up, it may be that he doesn't always stand out, but he's the player that when he does do it, people are going to go, he's brilliant. But, if he was that every week, he'd be playing Premier League and not League One. But you say there, I like that we took a free kick quickly, but I didn't like that we got the opportunity for a long Tom Hamer throw in injury time. And instead of doing that, we tried to hold on to it in the corner. It's like the ball went out. Like, it's as good as a corner. It's 3-0. Come on. And we didn't do it. I'm thinking, yeah, we've got the big guns at the back. We're not going to leave ourselves that exposed. Let's load the area. Let's get it in there. Let's create some excitement. And, maybe that's why I'm sat here talking about football and not in the dugout, sort of managing a team. Yes, I mean, that's the overall game, but I think there are quite a few little bits and bobs to pick out. Let's talk new boys, because it is the first game of the season. We did actually have 2 new players playing. We'll go to Sonny Bradley first of all. You do that kind of algebra, it would be POC equals SB, because for me, he just picked up where Pordy left off. Big, heads the ball away, kicks the ball away, threat at set pieces. I like Pordy O'Connor. This isn't a criticism at all, but he was meant to be the narrative of today's game, and now we're mentioning him 35 minutes in and only in comparison to a Lincoln player.
Absolutely right. Yeah, almost identical, other than being left-footed. So that's pretty much it. No nonsense centre back. No one won more aerial duels than Sonny Bradley. Only one player, Adam Jackson, actually, with more clearances in the game. Yeah, perfect. Just really solid, really solid game from both of them. No, it's a really good partnership yesterday. But yeah, particularly as a new player on his debut, just complete no nonsense, no risk, won everything. Yeah, exactly what you want at this level. And for me, we'll probably just touch on this as a final thoughts of the game. So I won't do it now, but kind of epitomised. What won us the game really was that kind of desire to go and win your battles.
Now, I'm still trying to get to grips with FootMob, but I look at headed clearances, so that's not duels. Sonny Bradley was actually third in our headed clearances. Second was Riley Towler. Now, this isn't a criticism, but he looked like a centre-back playing left-back, but he looked like a centre-back playing left-back relatively well. I wouldn't be comfortable playing the next 45 games with Riley Towler as our left back, but if we don't sign one until the final week of August, I don't think we've got a glaring issue at left back, if that makes sense.
Agreed. Yeah, I think we'll be perfectly fine with him there for the next few matches. And I think in certain matches against certain opposition, he can absolutely fill in there and with no issues from me. It works really well with Rico on the left because Riley's not going to be bombing on the overlap, playing at left back. He's going to be quite conservative, almost like an inverted fullback, really, is like a third centre back at times. But Rico's out on the left hand side holding the width and with that natural left foot on that side as well, that suits. If we want to attack in a different way with maybe Eric Ring or Jack Mullen playing on the left wing and we want to utilise Rico elsewhere, I don't think Riley Towler at left back kind of suits that. So it would be nice to have a really attacking, overlapping left back to complement that. We've then got two very, very different options there. But yeah, as a debut, I thought he was really solid, pretty no nonsense again as left backs go, but was competent and settled in nicely.
Now, when it came to man of the match, you and I both agreed, but before that, Ben disagreed. He picked Tendai Darikwa. Now, Tendai did something twice in the game that I'm sitting with somebody else now. Dale sits next to me, Dale Rowson. So that's all three of kind of my childhood friends group have now sat next to me. So whether it's an eagerness to sit next to me and they're rotating or an eagerness to get away from me and Dale's got the short straw, I don't know. So Dale now has it. And Tendai went on his long busting run. So everyone's going, get out. And they've got Lincoln coming out slowly. And Tendai is like road runner. Off he goes, like off the Wile E. Coyote. He's never going to get the ball. And Dale says, well, that's pointless, isn't it? He said, he's just expending energy and it's not achieving anything. I said, but it does achieve something because it lists a certain standard. All the fans now are going, yeah, Tendai, and applauding him, even though the second time, by the way, he was nearly cut out because he was out of possession. Got sponsors man of the match, got Ben's man of the match. That sort of run, whilst it may waste energy and it may not achieve anything in terms of progressing the play, does he make those if he's not captain? Do you think that's a kind of a lead by example? This is the effort we expect from everybody?
I think he does because it's Tendai and he was doing that last year even when he wasn't captain because he was almost like a second one on the pitch. But I do think it was very much a leading by example. Like if I'm doing it, then it sets the precedent, not to just chase up the pitch aimlessly, but as the team to get out to put the effort in. Because like I said, and it's a recurring theme of yesterday, and I imagine it'll be a recurring theme of the whole season. We were maybe technically inferior to Reading, but we were superior in every other way, tactically and physically was the big barometer. And yeah, there's one thing being able to run better than harder than your opponents. There's another thing is being willing to, and particularly late in the game. And when your right back is doing that, and because it does get a reaction from the crowd, and the crowd does impact players. It does, of course, it does. That's partly why we love football so much. Yeah, it makes sense. So I get Dale's point. Like if I'm a manager and I'm thinking about having like defensive shape and being hard to break down, am I thinking, God, I wish I hadn't done that, Tendai? Potentially. But then there's the intangible element of it takes your team out and it sets a precedent. So I liked it. I think it was interesting you mentioned that that will get a lot of people on his side. Not that he needed to get in on his side because he already had pretty much everyone on his side anyway. But in terms of that man of the match, because we're talking about those 2 lung-busting rungs, it makes you talk about it. It makes you remember it. Whereas who we both did name as man of the match. Also, we did this separately without knowing who either of us had nominated on our little videos yesterday. Conor McGrandles just does all the unseen work so well. Got an assist yesterday, of course, which maybe elevates that status a little bit. But no one won the ball back more than Conor McGrandles yesterday. 9 recoveries. Also had an 80% pass completion rate, which was more than all 3 of Reading's supposedly technically superior midfielders. And bearing in mind there's only 2 of ours in there. Just hardly put a foot wrong yesterday, Connor. So we both went for Conor McGrandles, but Tendai obviously was great. I think Rico Hagi had a great game as well. Again, the goal helps, but I think he had a good all round game. But I loved Michael Skibola's post-match press conference, really emphasising that team being the main factor that won the game. And I couldn't agree more. It was a real team effort. Everyone played a role. No one had a bad game. So that's that.
Well, the Stacey West readers are a well-informed lot because on the player rater, they have got Conor McGrandles at 8.4 as man of the match, Dariqua on 8.2, Adam Jackson on 7.9, so all quite close. Then 7.8, George Wickens, Rico Hackett, and Rob Street. So, yeah, a good overall showing. So what we will do now is we're going to go to a break. Now, what we traditionally do...
Oh, guys, you told me to not tell you this bit before we recorded, so I could tell you it now and it'd be a surprise.
But we're on 41 minutes, so go on.
Well, just it's a nice little cap.
You couldn't have dropped it in the last 40. You couldn't have dropped it in the last 41 minutes.
No,
go on.
There wasn't a time.
42 minutes. Go on.
Stats, Gary. Stats. Yeah. What won us the game? Well, our centre backs won a combined total of 14 aerial duels and 36 clearances. Reading centre backs only a combined 4 duels won and 14 clearances. I think that says a lot. Our midfield 6s, our midfield 2, pass accuracy combined of 83%, 80 and 86 respectively. Won the ball back 16 times between the 2 of them. Reading's 3 in midfield, so an extra player in that part of the pitch, an average of just 75% passing accuracy and 11 recoveries between 3 of them. That's your 2 centre backs and your 2 holding midfielders. That says it all. That is the story of the game for me. Keep that up, please, lads. That's it.
On the stats.
It's been a while.
Maybe we'll start playing that before you come on. So over the break, what we're going to do is, because there are plenty of watching now and there weren't earlier, we're actually going to play a brand new intro. So this was put together by predominantly Ben, but Stu as well. So have a listen to this. I should have said have a watch of this, shouldn't I?
Yeah, because it sounds exactly the same as it has every.
Yeah, it sounds exactly the same. But I think that's really good, and it's part of what could be a little bit of a rebrand, because the podcast may be in its 8th season, but in January the Stacey West site will celebrate its 10th birthday. So we are currently investigating a slight rebrand, so a little bit more on that. Usually at this stage we go through all the comments, but I've kind of been dropping them as we go along. So we will come back in, if you're okay, in a couple of seconds. If you have comments, by the way, on our new intro, please do let us know, because we worked on it hard as a group in terms of ideas and all that sort of thing, didn't we? And then obviously it's been brought together brilliantly by Ben and Stu.
Yeah, only nice comments, please.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm not going to say that. I don't accept comments on Twitter anyway, do I anymore? So actually, I do. I
don't even go on there anymore.
For people who are listening at home, I decided it was bad of me to turn off all comments. So I now let people who follow me only comment. And if somebody I don't know who's got like an anonymous thing, people who I follow. So if I follow somebody who's an anonymous, they come on and start giving me the usual kind of thing, club-centric, I just unfollow them. Simple. No, simples, as the little rugrat or meerkat or whatever. used to say Steve Banks loves the intro, brilliant, and Simon Wilcox loves a good sticker collection. Simon, one day if you're ever in Louth, I've got a box of sticker collections going back to Mexico 1970, which was obviously a little bit before my time. So yes, so we will come back in on now. Hello and welcome to the second part of the Stacey West podcast. It's one of those that are slightly weighted in that there's 40 odd minutes before this and there'll be 20 odd minutes after this. But in the 20 odd minutes after this, we have got an awful lot to talk about. But it's predominantly one bit of news. So let me cover that first of all. Nick Oxbury messaged me yesterday. Anyone who knows Nick Oxbury will think that is certainly nothing to shout about. But all through the transfer window, he messages me. And usually it's a rubbish rumour he's read somewhere. Or it's a rumour that's surfaced on he goes on Vitals a bit. And every rumour kind of gets on Vitals. It's one place I use, in fairness, because they're eagle-eyed on there. They pick something up and it's a good source of information. But even if it's like a Barnsley fan saying we're going to sign Tom Hamer, off he goes and kind of sends me that going, Tom Hamer's going to Barnsley without the context. So he messaged me yesterday morning, Jovon's going to Norwich, and I basically just sent him that emoji, like, come on, Nick, how many times do you send me this sort of crap? So I had to apologise to him. He then messaged me and said Jovon's not at the ground. I'm like, no, this can't be true. And it turned out to be true. Not long after Football League World put the story on, and not long after that, the club said that was also the case. Now, as we understand it at the minute, the job or the transfer is not finished. But picturing him watching them play, I can't think who they played yesterday. Did they play one of the Red Bull teams in a friendly or something?
Oh, no idea.
And he was in the director's box, sitting next to their directors. It looks like it's going to be a done deal. My understanding, and I haven't spoken to anybody at the club, but my understanding is that we are looking at a figure of around £1.5 million up front, with some add-ons that could take that further north. I'm not going to speculate on how much further north. And a sell-on, which you would imagine as a bare minimum is going to be 10%. Now, bear in mind that is 10% of any profit. So, for instance, if we sell him for 1.5 million and then he moves on for 6.5 million, we would get, if it's 10%, 550,000 sell-on, because it's 10% of the profit, not 10% of the overall sale. Just to be really clear on that, of course. Now, my initial reaction was, because I didn't want to lose Jovon, because we've backed Jovon on this podcast. I've been critical of him in the past because unbelievably I do have opinions that go one way and then the other. So I have been critical of Jovon, but I think last season he really broke out. I think he looked a threat last season. I think when he slipped into the right wing role, he looked borderline outstanding at times. He was unplayable through March. It always baffled me a little bit how it was Ethan Arahan that was being linked with the move away, and we were talking Pordy and we were talking Sean, and I just thought, of all the players that fetch big money, it's normally attackers and strikers. In this division, it's normally players that create goals. Of championship sides that take a punt, they don't often take a punt on defenders from this level, but it's always the attacking players. The lad Burrell that's just gone to QPR, he's only had 6 months at Burton, he's gone for £1 million, and it kind of just made me a little bit like, am I seeing something in Jovon that nobody else is, or that only a select handful of rose-tinted Lincoln City fans? Apparently no, apparently we were right. Just going to underline that. Everyone else was wrong. £1.5 million player. We're not going to say I told you so, because that sounds arrogant and smug, and I'm not. But Chris, what do you think?
We told you so. No, I joke, of course. But it's a nice affirmation, of course. So one thing I think is interesting here, though, is that as a fan base, generally, as a wider fan base, we're not used to developing talent all the way from 16 all the way through the first team and then selling on for a big fee. This has never happened before. We as fans judge what we see on the pitch, and sometimes it's very difficult to see that bigger picture. And you're right, sometimes you doubt yourself. You think, "Are we seeing something just because I'm a Lincoln fan and I want him to be good," rather than there is genuine potential. They're not just Jovon. This goes for all younger players that have come through the system. Hopefully what this does is it develops a little bit of trust with the process, because clearly the people that are running this football club know what they're doing. And this isn't a told you so moment as much as we joke that it is. It's just an affirmation is that, sometimes young players just need a bit of patience and a bit of time and a bit of opportunity. And as fans, because we want to win every game immediately, we don't see that bigger picture always. And this is a nice justification of that. it does work. So hopefully there'll be a bit of an understanding when, for example, if Zayn Okoro's career takes a similar trajectory in that starts to get a few minutes, doesn't look quite at the level, in and out of the team, then eventually starts to generate a bit of consistency. Hopefully, because of what's happened with Joe, and we go, okay, we get it now. That's what it looks like. That's what development looks like. It allows us all just to see that process a bit more now, because we've never seen it before. Literally, we've never seen it before. We've brought players in and sold them on. We've made decent money on some, like Anthony Scully, probably the only real forward player that we've made decent money on. But none of them have come through from like being a teenager all the way through the system. And this is the first time that we've done it. And for me, it feels like a really big moment for that reason. The finances, of course, are like genuinely life-changing for a football club like ours to sell a player for that a fee I don't expect all of it to be reinvested immediately. I don't imagine all of it to go towards transfer fees. I imagine it will allow us to offer slightly higher wages for certain players, and we might save some back for next summer and January and whatnot. But ultimately, I just think it's a massive moment for the club. Obviously for Jovon himself as well, and has earned his move. But I think it's huge for us for so many reasons, more than just the immediate finance.
I wrote an article this afternoon. Anthony Scully, Theo Eden, Harry Toffolo, Cohen Bramall, Lucas Jensen, Lasse Sorensen, Ethan Arahan, Sean Rowan, and Jovon Makama, all players that moved to what could be considered healthy three-figure sums. I can't remember Cohen, probably the bottom end of that, Jovon the top end of that. I'm not going to talk about the model because I don't like that. I don't like the thought that a football club thinks that it's doing something particularly different to everybody else, because half of the teams in this division want to do what we're doing. Half of the teams in this division want to unearth talent that they can sell. Half the teams in this division want to buy that talent to progress. So your Readings, your Huddersfields, your Birminghams, your Wigans, the players, the people that have come into Boltons, they want to buy the best players at this level. But those players are up for sale as well. George Thomason just left Bolton for 1.2 million, so they bought Arahan. So every club is on this buy and sell conveyor belt. And I know perhaps in the past, or some clubs are a little bit more hand to mouth. You look at your Blackpools, and I think, with Fraser Horsfall and their Iweki or whatever his name is. And I saw them linked with, I think, Duncan Watmore today. They're just functional signings. And I think perhaps under Michael Appleton, there were far fewer functional signings. Your Theo Edens, your James Joneses, players like that were nearly all being signed with a potential to sell on. Even when Conor McGrandles arrived, he's got sell on potential. So nearly everybody had sell on potential. I think we've hit the sweet spot over the last couple of seasons where we're bringing in the experience, the James Collins, the Tendai Doriquas, the Sonny Bradleys. We are still bringing in the talent that could be exciting in the future. And we're talking Eric Rings and Dom Jeffries and Riley Towlers. Right now, you look at those three players and go, well, they're not going to be anywhere near Jovon's level. But when Jovon first broke into the first team, I mentioned in my article, you and I had a rather heated debate with a person in a pub because I said the club believed that he could be worth over 1 million. And that was in December. Mm-hmm. It was in December when we had that conversation with that gentleman in that pub, and my dad was in fight mode.
I wasn't far away from being argumentative, and it takes quite a lot to get on the wrong side of me. Someone seriously messed up if that happens, and I was so. But it's so nice to be able to kind of be justified in that sometimes, and it's not just a personal thing. It's the whole club thing, isn't it? But ultimately, we all want the same thing. We all want our players to do well. Because that means we're doing well as a football club. It means we're doing something right, and ultimately that should translate itself on the pitch, albeit either immediately with the player here or with the investment that player then allows going forward. So we all want the same thing. We all just have different ways of showing it, don't we?
But let's state the obvious. It's all about recruitment. We've lost two big players without replacing them, and we already needed at least one. On the radio, Michael Horton interviewing Michael Skubala said that we needed 4. And by the way, Michael Skubala batting back questions about the transfer, I thought was just brilliant. He was almost saying, you're asking me about this, I don't know about it, we've just won a game of football, let's talk about that. And then the next question was about it again, and he's kind of like, I don't know about that, let's talk about the football. So I liked that, obviously, because I like everything about the club apparently. Sorry, I sound a bit salty, don't I? I've lost my train of thought now. I don't know where I was particularly going with that. Oh yeah. So Michael Horton said that we need 4 in my mind, 3 good acquisitions. In my mind, a left back, a holding midfielder that just offers something a little bit different to our current midfielders, and now certainly a wide player. What are your thoughts?
Agree totally. I think we need 3 players: left back, holding midfielder that can progress the ball from deep, profile we haven't got, and then another wide forward to supplement what we already have up there. I think with that, we'll be in a good spot. So we mentioned being a bit filling threadbare yesterday, but you add 3 first team ready players to that current nucleus with Dom Jeffries and Lewis Montsmouth to come back in the not too distant future. Then we're looking all right in terms of depth again. It's just right now, isn't it? It looks a little bit light. So I suppose one thing you mentioned earlier, actually, I want to just touch on. You mentioned that about the quote unquote model, but the approach that we've got, and in regard to it's bringing youth players in, and we've probably found a bit of a balance now where we have that supplementation in the squad of that more experience. I think you could argue that having that experience in the squad now, which is something just over 12 months ago we didn't really have as much of, we could argue that's kind of could have built the foundation to allow the likes of Jovon, Sean Rowan, etc., to go and then thrive and progress with that kind of foundation and structure kind of behind them in a way. I think Tendai playing behind Jovon on the right must have a huge role in regards to that progression. So that the balance is nice, but I think we need first team ready players now. I would love us to see to sign young first team ready players, like when we signed Ethan Arahan. Basically, he was like that A-star signing because he made us better straight away, but he also had significant sell-on value. Like, I would love for us to not have to restrict ourselves and only be able to buy one of those every window or every couple of windows. We can now go and get a couple, 2 or 3 of those players. I don't expect us to spend loads and loads of money on transfer fees. I don't expect us to rip up what's been working and completely break the wage structure. But could we offer a player $3,500 that we previously could only offer $3,000 over a 4-year deal? That's $100,000 taken up in just that extra £500 a week. But does that get 1 or 2 of those over the line that we maybe just missed out on previously? Does that little nudge just help us get 1 or 2 over the line that maybe we previously wouldn't have done? Maybe. I don't know how it's going to be invested, but I would like us to be quite ambitious with this, but also frugal. I wouldn't expect us to go and spend £500,000 in a player. Absolutely don't expect to see that at all. Do I expect to see a couple of 100K with a long-term deal? Maybe 1 or 2 of those.
Yeah, agreed. I think Steve Banks asked earlier about pushing the wage structure. I don't think we're going to break the wage structure. I don't think we're going to go out there and buy a holding midfielder and pay them $5,000 or $6,000, in all fairness. But I do think it just gives us a bit more scope. My personal feeling is, like you say, a couple of potentially 100, maybe 150,000 bit for players that we are absolutely sure of, maybe. But it just gives us a little bit of breathing room. But also, that clock's now ticking as well. And it's hard balancing, and Michael Scabala has been absolutely clear that we cannot afford to get one wrong. Peterborough can, because when they sell an Ivan Toney for however many million, they can kind of afford to then spend a little bit more on 3 or 4 players. And if one doesn't work out straight away, like an Alex Woodyard didn't work out for them, or the boy, I think it was Matt Stevens, didn't work out for him, or Chris Clark and Bradley Ayoven, I can't think what.
Even though he scored yesterday.
Yeah, from a penalty, in fairness.
Yes,
but they were players
leaving the club, and now he's leaving the line. Anyway,
last season they didn't work out for them. This season they've got that time. But again, it's like Eric Ring. Some will say didn't work out last season. Who knows what's going to happen this season? So it's going to be interesting. One point I did just want to pick up on that someone else had mentioned, Andy S. So tough for the Makama family when they had to sit and listen to some awful comments in the stands. Let's look at the main issue here that we haven't discussed at all is a young man going into the championship. Kate doesn't think Jovon's worth as much as we're getting, but not going to grumble about it. You're buying potential here, not talent. Dare I say, he's got talent, but would you value Jovon's contribution to our team last season at 1.5 million, potentially rising north of that with add-ons? Potentially not. Would you say his ceiling is 1.5 million with add-ons? Absolutely certain. So just a word on him. If he goes to Norwich, can you see him making it?
Yeah, I can. I think what Jovon's always had is the physical profile to play higher. He's got that brilliant combination of soft feet physicality and pace, which is very rare at our level. It needed honing, it needed polishing, and I think what we saw towards the end of last season was a player on a really steep upwards trajectory. So I think he absolutely has the physicality to go and play in a championship side, and I think he's got all the ability, he's got all the tools to be able to play regularly at that level. I really genuinely believe that. Now, do I think he's going to go straight into Norwich's team and play every single minute of every single game and score 20 goals this season? No, but can I see him making 20 first team appearances and maybe getting a handful and then building on that for the season after? Yeah, I do. Depends a little bit on whether Norwich lose Sargent as well, because you can imagine him playing in a similar sort of role potentially, almost getting your replacements in before you've sold your prized asset in that regard. But I do. I've always seen potential in Jovon. It's obviously skyrocketed since he's moved out wide, because there aren't many wingers that are 6'3", 6'4" that are also good with their feet, and that's really threatening and difficult to defend against, no matter what level you play at. So. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all that he's gone to the Championship. What surprised me is that it was this summer. But yeah, I do. I really genuinely think he'll be absolutely fine at that level. I don't expect to see him back in League One anytime soon.
It'll be interesting. I think Josh Sargent plays centre forward, doesn't he, rather than right wing? So it's whether they'll be able to give him the time on the right wing, but who knows? A lot of our players that have moved upwards have then not succeeded. Your Anthony Scullys and your Teo Edens, and you could argue that really Cohen Bramwell was probably one that did. Regan Paul, Harry Toffolo definitely, but it seems to be defensive players that do. One defensive player we thought would make it moved to Norwich and didn't, in Sean Raggett. So it'll be interesting. More often than not, players that are promoted from League One into the Championship in this way, not promoted, but bought, dare I say, more often than not, probably don't make it. But Jovon's younger. He's still a talent that's growing, not a talent that has grown or flourished. So I wish him all the best. I'm not going to make a prediction whether he can make it in the Championship or not, because there are so many variables. It's not just about him. If he gets the right mentoring, I don't think it's any coincidence that his breakout season came as Tendai came to the club. I remember you and I speaking to Ten at the sponsors event last year, and he was always saying, I'm taking Jovon under my wing, kind of thing. So I think that there's a belief that if you handle Jovon correctly, then he has a very high ceiling, but he does need the right mentoring. So I wish him all the best. I'm sad to see him go, and we're going to have to find another player that to champion that the crowd don't seem to like that we do, because that's Sean Rowan and Jovon Makama done. We're going to be touching on the hour now, so the final bit of news. It feels, when I say feels insignificant, I don't want to do the player an injustice, but certainly with everything else that's gone on, it feels like news that probably broke quite a long while ago, and it was literally only 3 years ago. So Tom Bayliss has signed a new deal with the club. He signed what is going to be it's a 3-year deal that will keep him with us until the summer of 2028. And Michael Scabala said, we still believe there's more to come from Tom. Bear in mind, he's only 26. We're delighted that he's committed his best years to Lincoln City. I liked the idea of Tom when he signed. I like Tom when he's on form. He's another one of those, dare I say, forgotten players almost, that he wasn't one that stood out massively last season, but probably only because he had the spell out injured. Had he not had the spell out injured, he'd have 2 or 3 more goals, 2 or 3 more assists. His set piece delivery is excellent. Set pieces are a strength. We saw it yesterday. We created a couple from the few corners that we had. So again, it's good news, isn't it? I mean, a senior player a core member of the squad. And I talked about in my article about identity. And now with losing Jovon and Sean Rowan and Paudie O'Connor and Ethan Araham, we kind of need a new identity. And Tom Bayliss feels like he's very much part of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was really pleased with this. Completely unexpected news. Really pleased with it. And obviously the fact it came out before the Jovon Makama news, at the time, my initial thoughts were, this is quite smart actually, because maybe we're finding it tough in the transfer market at the moment. It makes sense to tie down the good players you've already got to long deals, so that if the transfer market continues to be challenging, we know that we only have to add to what we've currently got rather than replace what we've currently got, particularly for a player who is unlikely to be leaving on a significant fee because he's not really of a development age, unless he scores 20 goals from midfield this season and, Championship club thinks where you can't not have a player like that quality-wise. He's unlikely to be a player that's going to be sold on for a huge profit. This is someone who's good for us now. So it makes sense to tie him down for longer in case, those players that potentially are looking to come in, we found it difficult. Now, of course, at the back of the Jovon Makama money, it means that we're likely now slightly more able in the market than we were going to be before. But identity, longevity, really good. And let's be honest, like Tom Bayliss had one poor season in a damn awful Shrewsbury team before he joined us and got released. Prior to that was a really high-performing player at this level. And prior to that, had played in the Championship. Like, if we had tried to sign Tom Bayliss one season before we did, he would probably have been unattainable for us. So we signed him at a good time. It was very opportunistic. And now we've tied him down to, like Michael said, for theoretically the best years of his career in his prime. I was all over this, completely unexpected, really, really like it. And his all-round game's good, but you have to put a special mention to that set-piece delivery because that's something that we put such importance on as a club. Good news all round, I think.
Conor McGrandles, Adam Jackson, Tom Bayliss, James Collins, Tendo DeRiqua, Sonny Bradley. We've got a real core of experienced players and experiences in games, in terms of games and the level played. There's kind of a nice mix there. I mean, I think Tom Bayliss at one point was when he moved from Coventry to Preston, it was a couple of million, wasn't it? Was it a £2 million transfer? He was like a Jovon Makama figure for us, came through the ranks, I think, at Coventry, moved on. We met him again. He's nice bloke. I think somebody commented, taller than you think. I have this imagine of like a diminutive kind of get on the ball and, like Georgie King-Cladsey style. And he's not. He's 6 foot odd, but it's just with everybody else. Sonny Bradley at 6'5" and Riley Towler at 6'4" or whatever. It's like I think there was only 2 Lincoln players yesterday standing under 6 foot. It's phenomenal. And another really interesting stat, and this is moving on a little bit. This is from Waffling Riot on Twitter. I really like this. After doing research, never has League One seen a game weekend with no draws, let alone the opening weekend. 24% of all League One results each season are draws. So it's near impossible to get a game week without a draw.
Oh, that's good. I love that sort of stat.
It's a good start, isn't it, that?
Yeah, that's fun.
And I'm assuming that, having said that, Bolton wasn't a draw today. No. Oh, they got beat. I hadn't seen that.
Isn't that fun?
That is fun. That is nice. Do you know what's been fun? This podcast, because the summer has been long. Like the last game, Wrexham, was only the week after I did a little thing called the London Marathon, for which we had a little photo up on the pitch beforehand. It was more than 15k raised between myself and Jasper. That was nice. But that seems like a lifetime ago. Like, it's been a long summer of days away in the van and gigs, and we're at a festival this coming weekend. So from next weekend, it's going to be, I think, Ben and Emily or Ben and Charlie. You and I will not be on that. We'll be following the Wimbledon game drunk in a field near Doncaster. But football's back, and it never ceases to amaze. We thought when the fixtures came out, we would be here talking about Paudie O'Connor's return to Sincil Bank, and it's the only thing that we didn't need to talk about. We've talked about Jovon Makama's departure. We've talked about Rob Street's return. We've talked about some players who perhaps at the end of last season we didn't think we'd be talking about. We even debated whether Rico Hackett and Adam Jackson would remain with the club or whether we'd offload. 2-0 against Reading. City are third, I think, or fourth in the table. End the season now. Turn me over. I am done. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, this was episode 395 of the Stacey West podcast. We are back for an 8th season, and you had better bet your ass we will be covering everything. Until then, up the imps.
Up the imps.